What's going on, guys? We got some huge news last night from Blizzard about Season of Discovery Phase 2. They hit us with raid details, new loot, quality of life improvements, runes, and the new PvP event. Now, you know me, I scrolled right down to Rogue runes. I was mid-raid fighting Cerevis and completely stopped tanking, stopped even playing, to the point where I got a DPS parse. But let's stop talking about it and let's get into it. We're going to hit Rogue runes first and then work our way through the rest. So first, we got a preview of two new runes. We're going to go through both of them and how they work in gameplay. First off, Master of Subtlety. Attacks made while stealth and for 6 seconds after breaking stealth deal 10% more damage. This is pretty simple, but a very effective rune. As far as PvP, I think it'll be a pretty strong addition to our openers, as well as being able to reset and come back, or vanish and eviscerate for a stronger finisher. For PvE, I think it becomes a little more nuanced, mainly because of snapshotting. Now, snapshotting, if you didn't know, is when you're buffed and you use a dot, the dot damage is increased even after the buff falls off. So for example, if you use Blood Fury, which increases your base melee attack power by 25%, and then use Rupture in that buff window, the damage is increased for the full duration of the Rupture. Now, even when the buff falls off, the Rupture will still do the damage it was doing when buffed, even if you were to use it with 1 second left in Blood Fury. So now, with this 10% damage buff, whatever dots we cast in this window become buffed for their full duration. Garrote, Rupture, and here's the kicker, Saber Slash. Saber Slash is kind of unique in the sense it gets snapshotted, and provided you never let the buff fall off, will never lose that 10% increase. It takes the highest damage you can get, and even when you override the dot with the new one, it sticks to the highest damage point. Now, Deadly Poison works the same way, I believe, but it's a little more RNG because of the chance to apply, so you can't really rely on it in the window unless we're shivving, and that's not going to happen. So how does this transfer into PvE? Well, Vanish becomes a DPS cooldown. As your opening Garrote and Rupture are falling off, you can get to 4 combo points, pull your energy, Vanish, Garrote, Rupture, and Saber, provided you didn't get Saber off in the opening window, maybe the pull was early or whatever, and you didn't get the opening buff Saber, you would get all those abilities at 10% increased damage for their full duration. You could also Garrote, wait a tick, Envenom, unload Sabers, and try to get that 5th stack of Deadly in the window, and your Poison, Garrote, and Envenom would all be buffed. So at first glance, the rune might seem a little bland, but the gameplay around it's going to be very cool. The second rune previewed is Shuriken Toss, and it's got a different name, but it's basically Fan of Knives minus the poison application as far as we know. In the last video I called it, I said this was the most likely rune we would see, and here it is. So Shuriken Toss. Throw a shuriken at your enemy, dealing damage equal to 25% of your attack power, and also strike up to 4 additional nearby targets. Awards 1 combo point. This one is a very simple but very strong AoE ability. So strong, in fact, I wouldn't be surprised to see a cooldown put on it, which would kind of hurt rogue tanking, but be very fitting for DPS. So this is essentially our AoE damage now. I gotta believe they put this in for tanks and dungeons, but with 25% attack power as damage, this thing is going to slap at high targets. Right now at 25, I have 335 attack power. 25% of that is 83. My Sinister Strike hits between 90 and 115, give or take. So this, hitting all 5 targets because it's 4 additional from your primary, for 83 damage would rip for 400 plus damage a throw. That's pretty big damage. So depending on the cost and if there's a cooldown, we could see some big AoE damage coming from rogues. My tank view on this is I hope it costs 40 energy, has no cooldown or a short one, and they bring the damage down now so it doesn't get nerfed once we're used to it. Ideally, they would keep it strong enough for us to hold threat with the occasional mob breaking off, but not strong enough that rogues become AoE kings, because I don't think that's where we need to be. We should have some sort of balance across classes for AoE. Next, we got a quality of life change, and a pretty decent one at that. We're getting Redirect. Redirect transfers any existing combo points to the current enemy target. Requires active combo points, that's important too. Now, how Redirect worked was if you had combo points on a mob and swapped to a new mob, you could bring the combo points from your previous target to your new one. Now, right now, they don't have any kind of cooldown information, but the original one did have a 1-minute cooldown, which isn't bad. I think a lot of us are so used to not being able to target swap that it's just going to be a W whenever it's up. You know, you're just going to pop it whenever it's up to rotate some combo points, and it will be good before raid bosses, being able to swap it to the boss and get a early slice and dice running before you run into the battle. Oh, and the best part, it's not a rune. so it won't take a rune slot. Technically it's called a manual, which does open up some cool possibilities for what we can get in the future, because now they're not just adding moves randomly for people to yell, it's just retail, but instead adding items we can learn abilities from. So it's the same but different, and probably more palatable for people inside. All right, let's look at Gnomeregan. Level 40, 10-man raid, new world buff coming. They also mentioned in this post that at 40, the BFD buff in Darnassus will no longer apply to you. I think that's cool. We get a new world buff every phase. We don't have to go back. It's not going to be like hardcore where you have a Discord post saying Darnassus at 5:30 and everybody congregates there and then gets the buff and leaves. You won't have to go run that raid prior to running Gnomer in order to get that buff going. So I think that's overall a pretty good change. They did mention the lockout phase in the very beginning. There will be 2 lockouts on the normal weekly lockout timer. This means the first of these raids resets will occur on February 13th and the second will occur on February 20th with regularly scheduled maintenance. That's good, you know, keeping an eye on it. This will also allow for leading edge players to get to level 40 and start their hunt in the raid right away, but also minimizes the number of lockouts missed for those who level more slowly. It's an okay compromise. I know there was a lot of people who wanted them to wait a week in order for it to come out, and then there was some people who wanted it to be out immediately and felt like they were being slighted. But I think the general population, it's not really going to matter. This is really not going to matter. Level up, level with friends, have a good time. If you're not 1% people that are just grinding as fast as possible to get world first, which is kind of silly in a level 40 raid anyways, personally, that's what I think, then it's not really going to matter to you. Just level up, have fun, play with your friends. All right, we got some boss updates. Grubus, new radiation vents may come into play in this encounter. Crowd Pummeler 960 has moved to a new part of the dungeon where your encounter will occur on a raised platform before a crowd. This is going to be funny because anybody who's done Gnomer knows that this guy does a pretty hefty knockback. And so you kind of tank him usually against the wall or in the tunnel where he was before. So I can't wait to see somebody who's just not paying attention just get yeeted off the side of this thing. That's going to be funny. Mechgineer Thermoplug now has a mechanical suit as part of his arsenal. I don't really know what that means. So there's not a lot of detail on the bosses. They're just good. Don't tell us what it is. Let us just play. I think that's in the spirit of Season of Discovery for sure. All right, let's check out some of the gear. Bonk Maestro's handguards. No stats, increased fist weapon, and mace skill by 5. I wish it was swords. I think with the sword spec being as good as it is, and our precision and expertise talents, we still don't go for maces or fists. Domesticated attack chicken. Release your domesticated attack chicken that will fight for you for 1.5 minutes or until defeated. This could be really good. Seems basically like a battle chicken, which is really good, especially if it has the same buff as the engineering chicken. And if you can run them at the same time, that's going to be really good as well. The Mechano Strider Muffler looks good, but again, I think swords are going to beat it. It does have more damage than, say, Vanquisher Sword, but Vanquisher Sword has 10 more attack power and also benefits from sword spec. So we'll have to see how that plays out. I know there are some high damage maces, but even those were beat out by lower damage swords with sword spec. So it's going to be interesting to see if we still go swords or with these new items we go maces. The good side to mace spec is you get 5 more skill by going into it. The downside is its effect is a stun, which most raid bosses can't be stunned. So it kind of deletes half of the effect in raids, although mace spec is very good for PvP. So we might see some swaps between PvE and PvP gear a little more so than last phase. Wordle's Hardened Core. 7 stamina, 5 nature and arcane resistance, increases your chance to dodge by 1%, and then on use increases armor by 1000, but movement speed is reduced by 60%. Effect cannot be removed and lasts for 10 seconds. This is probably a solid tank trinket for us. I think the resistances will be very good in the raid. It seems like just from that they're going to be doing a lot of nature and arcane damage, so maybe the resistance benefits us a little bit more because we don't have the flat magical damage mitigation that warriors and bears have. So this could be a decent slot to have. It obviously it's not a damage trinket, and as we saw in BFD, you can kind of tank in full damage gear, but hopefully this raid's a little harder and requires tanks to actually be a tank, in which case this would be really good, especially if there's tank busters in the fights. Increasing armor by 1000 when you get hit by that tank buster is really going to beef us up. Now going down a little bit more, it looks like they didn't add a single leather item to the preview. Even down in the profession sections, they did add plate, which makes sense because plate is a new type of gear you can wear at level 40. I think we still do get some sort of leather item that's epic and has some sort of effect on it. I think they're just not showing it here. Although one thing they do show in the profession sections, they preview an enchanting item that looks really good. Enchanted Sigil, Innovation. Gain an Enchanted Sigil of Innovation, empowering you to deal up to 20 increased damage and healing with spells, and increasing attack power by 20 for 30 minutes. This can only be applied outside of combat with a 30-minute cooldown. I think this is going to be a pretty good item to have. It doesn't seem like it takes up a slot or anything like that. It looks like it's just a consumable. And if you remember back to BFD, that world buff gave us 20 attack power and 2% crit. So this just being a usable item that you can just keep this buff up on you, that's going to give you 20 attack power, is pretty good for just an enchanting item. Now, I don't know if it's going to beat out engineering. My original plan was to be leatherworking engineering, but depending on how good the leatherworking item is, and we won't know until the release of phase 2, I might be engineering enchanting, because this seems like a pretty solid item to have. We're gonna have to see what the effects we get and the item we get. We don't know anything about that now, but it's really good to see that they're trying to buff up some other professions to make it so that engineering is not the end all be all. All right, let's hit the Blood Moon. With phase 2 of Season of Discovery, we are introducing a new PvP event called the Blood Moon. This new event brings with it a bit of mayhem to Stranglethorn Vale, and the Blood Moon will shine above the zone, casting an eerie red fog on the area. Building on what we have learned from the Ashenvale PvP event, thank God, we have created this event to occur on a more predictable timetable so that players can plan for when they are able to take part. So the event is the Blood Moon, every 3 hours, lasts for 30 minutes. That seems kind of short. 30 minutes? I know that Ashenvale wasn't very long, but it seems short. Anyways, during this event, killing players will allow you to earn a currency which can be traded for various rewards. While you can still group up with allies for the event, the Blood Moon is a harsh mistress and will punish those in raid groups. I'm gonna guess that it's either a damage reduction or like a stat reduction per person in the group. So you could probably duo with a friend and not have a significant decrease to your stats, but if you're rolling with 40 people, you might be able to just get nuked by pretty much everybody, so it kind of balances that out, which I think is really good. You don't want massive raid groups just rolling through. The downside to this is people are just going to raid group up to 40, and then everyone leaves the group, and they're just going to run in a pack, and everybody's not going to have that negative effect on them, but they're still going to be in a pack of 40. So it's going to be a little tougher on the healers, for sure, because they're not going to be able to see everyone's health bar, but it's still going to have that same effect of a steamroll. So I like what they tried to do, but I feel like people are just going to cheese it, which they always will. For those who would rather live in peace and harmony with the land, you can opt out of the event by speaking with the Zandalari emissary. You will not be able to earn any rewards from the event, even if you opt out, and general realm PvP rules will still apply. I'm on a PvP server, so I can't opt out of anything. Unlike the Ashenvale PvP event, there will not be any PvP objectives in Stranglethorn Vale's event, which is good because it's going to stop this from turning into a PvE event. It's just going to be a kill all the players you see event, which I think is what PvP should be. Granted, I'm not a big PvPer, but I still can respect the event. You will also need to keep a sharp eye out for the Chosen of the Blood Loa, who is more than a force to be reckoned with and will kill all in its path. So I wonder if this is something you can kill, or if it's just like a 60 raid boss that's just gonna roll through and stomp people. I think it'd be more fun if it was just a massively powered NPC that when you see, you know, you're in battle, you're fighting, if you're with 10 people and you're in like this bloodbath in the field, and then the Chosen Blood Loa comes walking over, everyone just has to panic and run away because they're all gonna die. So I think that's a cooler concept than being like, oh, let's just kill it. You know, you kind of want that monstrosity. It's almost Stitches, you know? When you were low level and you're going through Duskwood and you saw Stitches, you didn't think, oh, let's just fight him. You just ran. So I think that's what they should do in this same aspect, is make him so strong that people have to run from him. I think that's just kind of a fun concept. All right, let's look at the rewards. If you're going to spend currency on new rewards, you will want to seek out the merchant just outside the Gurubashi arena. Players will be able to earn new class-specific items. That's cool. I think it's cool when there's class-specific stuff because everybody wants their class to have a cool item and be the only one that can use it. This mace looks very good, and that's just for warriors. And then we have this Emberblood seal that's just for mages. I'm curious what rogues are going to get. Probably a dagger, just to keep the rogue lore, I'm guessing. I hope it's a sword. As you can see, I love sword spec and I love combat, so hopefully it's a sword for me, but I think it's more likely going to be a dagger. There are also 2 new faction agnostic mounts, so Horde or Alliance can have either of these. Players will be able to acquire by participating in the event. These level 40 mounts also have new appearances. So At 40, we get our actual mount, so these are things we're going to be able to ride everywhere, which I think is very cool. There are also new quests that will help you with Arathi base and reputation. This event will not have an associated world buff. Okay, so we're losing the Ashen Veil buff. Interesting. I think that's fine. I think the Ashen Veil buff was kind of skewed damage a lot because you could only get it once per week, and then you'd always have to battle with, do I want to use it here or here, whatever you're doing. You say you wanted to parse and you went into a raid group and you used it, and then everybody sucked and you couldn't parse anyways because bosses were taking far too long to die. Kind of felt like, I just wasted this thing, especially since you couldn't boon it. So I'm okay with the event not having an associated world buff. PvP updates. Additional adjustments are coming to matchmaking. While we understand they can be frustrating for solo players to match against pre-made groups, we want to be careful about impacting queues. To address this, we are implementing 2 changes. Players in groups of 5 or fewer, you will have a higher chance to match against groups of 5 or fewer. Likewise, if you are in a group of 6 or more, you will have a higher chance to match with groups of 6 or more. This will help aid in matching more pre-made groups with pre-made groups and non-pre-mades with non-pre-mades when possible. To account for the potential to create longer queues with this updated matching system, the system will ignore these rules after a period of time should we start to see these queues impacted. This will then match you with the first available so you can play without having to wait too much longer. I think it's a good balance. That's actually in the video that I never actually put up, I said that this was the only way that they could balance it, was to make it so if you have 5 people, you go against 5 people. If you have 4, you go against 4. So this is kind of the same system that I was talking about in that previous video. And I do like that if it takes too long, they just say, all right, we're just gonna throw you in, because I would rather play against a pre-made, 15 minutes into my queue than wait another 15 minutes. So I think it's a good balance. It's a tough battle for them to deal with that. I think this is the best way they probably could have done it. Veil will be moving to a 3-hour timer as well with phase 2. The weekly quest world buff will not apply to players after 39, so you will be able to pop in and get it to help with your questing, but once you're at 40 you won't be able to get it. That's pretty good. I like that. Again, no more GDKP runs. This is basically saying that they're going to make this probably a bannable offense if they were to put it into terms of services. Given the experimental nature of Season of Discovery, we want to try things without this type of transaction taking place in this game mode. With the launch on February 8th, we will be restricting this activity. We will have more information to share on our official channels, and we'll be monitoring feedback closely. I think that's really good for the game. I think GDKPs in itself wasn't bad, but it encouraged gold buying, which was bad. So I think that's overall a good change. For players looking to catch up with friends above level 25, we will be implementing a 50% experience buff for players between 1 and 25. That's huge. 50% experience is big. Players will also see an increase in experience gained within the Black Fathom Deep's raid dungeon when it's cleared. The raid dungeon will still continue to run with the current lockout timer, and players will no longer be able to gain the world buff beyond 39. So it's going to be a lot easier to level, and if you do the raid, you're going to get a ton of XP from it, so that's good to know. WAYLAID supplies will also see an adjustment. We will share more later on, but there will be a significant increase in experience gained from them on turn-in. So if you haven't started collecting WAYLAID supplies, get out there and start doing it now. If you're a dwarf, turn on find treasure, and then most likely, like 90% of the time, a chest will have one of these in there. That's the easiest way to do this. I've made a video about it before that you can click over here if you wanted to take a look at it, but that is the easiest way to get these WAYLAID supplies. I was able to get to Honored on my rogue when you needed Honored to get the tank rune in like 3 hours. So if you want to collect WAYLAID supplies fast and you are a dwarf, click this video over here and see how I did it. Until next time, guys, see you later.